So today I'm going to be talking about simple and complex behaviors. One of the main topics from this section is discrete sensory inputs can stimulate both simple and complex behaviors. To understand behavior, you have to answer 4 questions, which is the main basis. Number 1 is what stimulus elicits the behavior, and what are the psychological mechanisms that mediate the response. Number 2 being how does animals' experiences during growth and development influence their response. Number 3 is how does the behavior make the animal more likely to survive and reproduce. And number 4 being what is the behavior's revolutionary history. The first 2 questions ask actually something called proximate causation. Proximate causation is how a behavior occurs or is modified. Proximate causation was actually studied by Tinbergen, who later went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1973 for his research. The last 2 questions of the top 4 are actually ask ultimate causation. Ultimate causation is why a behavior occurs in context to natural selection. So, yeah. Another term needed to know is behavioral ecology. Behavioral ecology defined is the study of the ecological and evolutionary basis for animal behavior. Ultimate causation is actually a central concept for behavioral ecology, so that's really one thing y'all really need to know right there. Next in the chapter, they actually talked about fixed action patterns and Tinbergen's research. So fixed action patterns is actually a sequence of unlearned acts directly linked to a simple stimulus. An example would be the territorial response of a male 3-spined stickleback, which we'll learn later. A sign stimulus is an external sensory cue that triggers the fixed action pattern, which we'll also give an example of while learning about Tinbergen's research. Okay, so going to Tinbergen's research, he studied a fish called a 3-spined stickleback. He had them in fish tanks. In this species, the males have red underbellies, while the females do not. It's shown that the males in the species attack other males when they invade their others' nesting territories. Tinbergen really didn't have a breakthrough until he realized and observed that sticklebacks reacted aggressively when they saw a red truck pass by the tank. So with the red truck and the red bellies and learning about fixed action patterns, Tinbergen concluded that the color red is actually the proximate cause of attack for male sticklebacks. So the color red would be the sign stimulus for the fixed action pattern of the territory response of the 3-spined stickleback. This section also talked about migration. Migration defined as regular long-distance change in location. It also talked about how animals such as birds know how to get from point A to point B and back. A few examples of that would be they track the position of the sun, they follow magnetic fields and stars, or they go off something called the circadian clock, which is pretty much like an internal mechanism of the 24-hour cycle. It's what we run off of as well. It's just like day and night cycles, our sleep schedule practically. Here are 3 examples of migratory and non-migratory birds. The migratory birds include the waxwing, a swallow, or a blackbird, and non-migratory birds include a great horned owl, a turkey vulture, and a red-tailed hawk. Behavioral rhythms. So there's 2 rhythms under behavioral rhythms. One is a circadian rhythm, which goes off the daily cycle of rest and activity. It's based on the circadian cycle, hence the name circadian rhythm. It's normally synced with the light and dark cycles, and it's maintained during hibernation if an animal hibernates. The second rhythm is the circannual rhythm. This rhythm is a lot of rhythms, but it's rhythms that are longer, such as migration and reproduction. It's linked to yearly or seasonal cycles. An example of this being fiddler crabs. Uh, they time their mating based on the lunar cycle for better survival of their offspring. Since their offspring are produced and born on the shores, they just don't want the tide to get them. So this is a fiddler crab. Animal signals and communication. Signal is defined as a stimulus transmitted from one organism to another. An example being a male crab waving their claws in a specific pattern, generating stimulus for the female to mate. Communication is defined as transmission, reception, and response to those signals. Forms of animal communication. So there's actually 4 common modes of animal communication, and I also gave examples in fruit flies. So the 4 common modes are visual, chemical, tactical, and auditory. In fruit flies, the visual mode would be a male detects a female in his field of vision, and then he orients his body to her. The chemical would be males use an olfactory system to detect chemicals released by the female to determine if they're the same species or not. The third, tactile, would be the male goes and touches the female with his forelegs, alerting her of his presence. And the fourth would be auditory, which would be the male informs female he's of the same species by flapping his wings and making sound. Pheromones was briefly discussed in this chapter as well. Pheromone is a chemical substance emitted for communication. So examples of the pheromone. The pheromone 2-methylbutyrenal is the pheromone that helps newborn rabbits locate their maternal nipple. Also, the pheromone buncule is secreted by female moths to attract males. As you can see in these 2 photos. This is my works cited. Thank you for listening.